Dystopia warning, obviously. Now, I'm only going to very briefly touch on American politics today, and then I'm going to focus most of my attention on pointing and laughing at the immensely humiliating and damaging meltdown happening within reform. It's been a lot of fun watching them fall apart like wet cake, but before I get onto that, I accidentally predicted something that the Americans would go on to do, despite it being one of the most ridiculous things that I could possibly think up. In my video the other day, I set the scene of Trump running amok, being like a drunk with no trousers on let loose in Tesco. And the other world leaders, they're like the paramedics attending, going, yeah, of course, Donny, you can, invade Greenland. But the other thing I said was this. Of course you can rename, retrospectively, the Enola Gay, the Enola Straight. Just calm down. Put your trousers on, you mad cunt. And it turns out I wasn't far off, because the Enola Gay aircraft and other historical items have been inaccurately targeted under the Pentagon's anti-DEI purge. Whilst they didn't rename the Enola Gay the Enola Straight, they did flag it for removal because it contains the word gay and could be seen to, be supporting diversity, equality and inclusion. And who'd want that? This is also related to people with gay in their surname. Must be a pretty bad time. Well, it's pretty bad most of the time, but it must be especially bad now to be called Gaylord in America. An estimated 8,000 people have this name in America. A name that I only knew existed because of America. What's going to happen to those people? There are 2.54 people named Gaylord for every 100,000 Americans. This is serious, though, because it's not just ridiculous things like this. Other targets, or most of the targets under this frankly Nazi level shit that the Americans are doing, include the achievements of women and people of colour, including reference to the country's first black pilots, highly decorated servicemen, women's achievements in science, plus removing commemorative months like Women's History Month or Black History Month. And they've also banned trans people from serving in the military. I'm almost scared to satirise stuff now, because I'm starting to feel like Nostradamus with tits. Anyway, now for something that shouldn't be news in Britain, but absolutely is news because Reform are disproportionately platformed despite being a fringe far-right party. Now, if you're thinking, well, you're talking about them, Tan, so you're not really much better, are you? To some extent, you would be accurate, yeah. The difference is I'm critical of them. And by critical, I mean willing to rip the living piss out of them. What's happening inside Reform is being described as a civil war, which for a party of 5 MPs, all of which are mendacious, ugly, corrupt morons, is more like a, posh boy scuffle. Them fighting amongst themselves about who can burn the £50 note in front of the asylum seeker out the front of the Colton Club, Anyway, this all played out very publicly. It was very humiliating. And I watched it all happen while sitting there laughing my arse off, if I'm honest with you. Farage is already losing support for being pro-Trump, who is about as popular in Britain as a dose of the clap, whilst failing to condemn Putin, because old patriot Nige is a big fan of Putin. And what this all relates to is Fash Clown impersonating a human, badly, Rupert Lowe, Reform MP for Great Yarmouth. He was interviewed by the Daily Mail, an interview in which he was critical of Farage whilst also failing to hide his own obvious leadership ambition. This added salt to the wound for Farage, who is an egomaniac, because far-right daddy Musk said in January that Farage doesn't have what it takes and endorsed Rupert Lowe, which was essentially a nail in the coffin for Rupert. Because what Reform is trying to do in Britain is pitch itself as the Trump-style hard-right alternative. We've not had a party to the right of the Tories in Britain ever. And the Conservatives, for at least the last 8 years of their 14-year reign of terror, were basically applying UKIP Reform-style policy. And look at where that got us. Tory MPs stuffing their pockets with public money, taking second, third, fourth, fifth jobs, rolling out of brothels. It was posh boy chaos. Like peak private school mafia. So Reform is getting an assist with Elon Musk, a man who is also endorsing every hard right alternative in Europe whilst he interferes in elections. I told you the other day about how we endorsed Romanian candidate Calin Georgescu, who was found with 10 million in cash, tickets to Moscow and shocking links to Russia. The people that Elon Musk tends to back are people that are useful idiots, fake patriots, people willing to sell their souls and sell out their country for the benefit of billionaires and foreign powers. And that's why you never trust a flag shagger, because behind that flag, they're likely getting a handy from a dictator. So now the wheels are coming off at reform. I mean, who saw that coming? You get a bunch of former city boys, ex-bankers, right? 3 of them. Then you throw in a convicted wife beater and a village idiot like Lee Anderson. And funnily enough, you get chaos. Now, what this all comes down to is the fact that Farage can't stand not being the star of the show. Even if he's a part of a, so-called team that consists of other millionaires like Lowe, who's worth an estimated 30 million, the former chair of a football club. Think about why he wants power. You see, this is having consequences broadly in politics. This is all hurting reform in a number of ways. They were polling high. They were getting a lot of idiots signing up to be members. They even had a few soulless, greedy Tory MPs defect. Now would probably broadly be considered the peak time for defection. But their polling's slumping, probably because Starmer had an impressive couple of weeks being a diplomat and statesman on the world stage. So this ego-focused circus of chaos, it will hurt them. And I like that. So Lowe did this interview with the Daily Mail, accused Farage of having messianic qualities and broadly doubted his ability to deliver the goods, and said that reform needs to change from being a protest party, right? And unlike Farage, he refused to rule out an alliance with the Conservatives. Mind you, seeing as I'm apparently Nostradamus with knockers today, I have said previously, and I stand by it, I think that by the time you get to the next general election, Farage is going to defect the Conservatives and leave reform in the dust and run as leader of the Tories. The Tories will be so desperate at that point, they'll probably just bend over and let him in. So anyway, the interview with Lowe trails off into truly sickening territory, frankly. At one point he says that he would deal with asylum seekers by putting them in a tented camp. Fuck me. Very Boer War of you, Rupert. With a minimum of food on a remote island like off the Scottish and English coast where they can just be detained. Put them there, ... and let the midges do the rest. If only there was some kind of historic parallel for putting a concentration of people into a camp. That's the kind of extremism you get with Rupert Lowe. And that's precisely the reason why Elon Musk supported him. Now, shortly after this Daily Mail exclusive, shit hit the fan for old Rupert. Couldn't have happened to a nicer bastard, could it really? Reform reported him to the police over alleged threats of violence to the chair, Zia Yusuf. And they claimed that they had a record of complaints from female employees. Lowe had the whip suspended, pending investigation, and now he sits as an independent. He has, in political terms, had his balls chopped off. They talk about acting swiftly, because apparently women were affected by this, yeah? Again, they have a man convicted of attacking a woman as one of their MPs, James McMurdoch. It's very difficult for me to draw a balance here because I hate everyone involved. I mean, Lowe denies all allegations, right? But he's a shithouse. Farage is probably smearing him to, just get him out the way. One of the most problematic aspects about all of this is how popular Rupert Lowe is in the first place, despite having extreme views. And ever since this all kicked off at the end of last week, Farage and Lowe and other members of Reform have been trading blows publicly, and it's been hilarious and causing immense cognitive dissonance for all the idiotic right-wing mouthpieces. So the wheels are falling off, not just because of their domestic squabbling, which is undermining any illusion that they have any form of political integrity, but also their association with the mad administration in America. And we have a track record of what Faragian policy being implemented by a government looks like. Now, he'd argue that they weren't implementing his policy accurately. If anything, they were probably implementing his kind of policy more competently than he would. And now the Tories are going fully mental. You've got Jenrick doing these fash walks, saying increasingly EDL shit. You had little Chris Philp on the Sunday media rounds, looking like a budget Arnold Rimmer, pushing for the removal of human rights for asylum seekers, desperately trying to outfash the mad fascists at Reform. There's no two ways about it. Reform is a far-right party. The shocking, chilling comments made by people like Rupert Lowe are not uncommon, but a graphic insight into the thought processes of these multi-millionaire chancers. And if you needed further proof, Well, they're endorsed by Musk. And Farage spends more time in America than the UK. You know, he's just always over there desperately trying to touch Trump's chubby. So for them to come crashing down is our first step towards reclaiming sanity, because their existence is unfortunately pushing other parties to greater extremes, even Labour. They're essentially making the Overton window an arrow slit in the castle owned by one of the multi-millionaires bankrolling reform. They understand advertising. They understand how to target and who to target. Throw a bit of nostalgia and racism at the older vote. Use modern methods to radicalise the youth. And they have the money to pour into it. And none of it is organic because they are deliberately boosted by Daddy Musk. However, in the real world, very few people could probably name even one of those dickheads. Most reasonable people rejected Faragian-style policy at the last general election, and under the two-party dominated nature of first past the post, they're unlikely to make any headway unless they do merge to create a horrifying creature by joining forces with the Conservatives. And because Farage has all the moral fortitude of a common street thief, I predict that's precisely what he's going to do. But there is a reason why these multi-millionaires want to attain power, and it's not anything to do with public service. They will tell you what you want to hear. They've mastered public speaking techniques. They have no fear because they are psychopaths. And with the other hand, they'll be dismantling from within for the benefit of billionaires and themselves or foreign powers. And who would suffer the most if that happened? The poor people that voted for them and the poor people that didn't vote for them. The poor people, basically. A la Trump. You know, privatised National Health Service, two-tier survival rate, a two-tier society. The richest getting richer, the poor getting poorer. Because this is how it works. This is how they work. Self-interest, not national interest. And there's nothing new or original about any of this. Classic, old-school tactics repeated again and again and again because the public let it happen. The public endorse it. The public are sold a con. The public buy it. It is peak regression. It's just two old chancers using politics as a conduit. And I'm personally having a wonderful time pointing and laughing as their own egos absolutely, unequivocally, 100% fuck with them. Till next time. Feel free to print this out and use it as a dartboard.